Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I think one of the things that the Secretary of State has managed to do, which is quite remarkable really, is to unite both sides of the Pennines in our view that it's time for him to go. Lancashire and Yorkshire don't normally get on that well, but we are united, and I think ministers will know that in recent weeks the great newspapers of the North have united on their front pages calling for the Secretary of State to go. We've had ITV also joining in recent times as well. So the Yorkshire Post and my own newspaper in Hull, the Hull Daily Mail, are very clear. We cannot carry on like this. Enough is enough. And of course we've heard in recent weeks around the timetabling fiasco that's happened particularly with Northern. But I wanted to just look more broadly really as a Member of Parliament for the North about what this government has said about its commitment to the Northern Powerhouse and to the connectivity between the east and west of the North and uniting and bringing together the great cities of the North. But we know, despite all those words, and every time a minister gets up to talk about it, the reality on the ground is very different. We know the investment that's going into the North pales in comparison to what's going in to London, 5 times as much investment in London. We know with Transport for the North, which the ministers always talk about, is only a consultative body. It does not have statutory powers. It does not do what Transport for London is able to do to bring in all the investment that we see in London. And we know with the fiasco in recent years around the electrification of the lines across the Pennines, Hull was actually missed off the first plan that was put forward, and we had to go away and put together our own plan using private sector money to actually be part of that electrification scheme. That went into the Department of Transport and then several years later with the current Secretary of State was refused. And there's confusion about actually what the electrification across the Pennines is going to be in the future. We thought we were going to get electrification. It now seems that the Secretary of State has suddenly discovered bimodal trains, which seems for me have been around for quite a long time. And one of the other issues I raised in the House recently was when we were looking at space travel, commercial space travel. It seems to me we're going to have commercial space travel before we get the line to Hull actually electrified. Now, the timetabling issue has been talked about a lot by people today. And I know in Hull, one of our big issues has been that when the new timetable was actually originally agreed, for some strange reason, Hull was given slower trains to go across the Pennines. So this whole idea that this was to speed things up and to connect cities, Hull is now finding itself with trains that take 15 to 20 minutes longer to get across to Manchester. And when the new rolling stock comes in as part of the franchise with TPE, we know that in Hull we're not getting new trains. We're getting refurbished trains. However, if you look down the road, you look to Scarborough, and I'm not again going to cast any aspersions that one of the previous ministers for rail came from Scarborough, but Scarborough has now got faster trains going across the Pennines, and it's got new trains as well. So how come, I have to say, how come great cities of the North are being treated like this? I also just wanted to remind the Minister who's on the Treasury bench of the 3 things that we would have expected that the Secretary of State would have supported us on in Hull. A half-hourly express service across the Pennines as part of the Northern Powerhouse, a direct train to Liverpool and a direct train to Manchester Airport. I found out last week that Llandudno has a direct train to Manchester Airport. Well, good on them, but why hasn't Hull got one? And we've also heard from the front bench about the franchise and the dogma that's being put forward around why franchising is carrying on. But I want to mention open access trains, because in Hull we had to fight very hard to get Hull Trains, an open access operator, to provide that direct service to London. But they're in meltdown, and I haven't seen anything from the Department of Transport or the Secretary of State commenting on that. The rolling stock that we've got constantly break down. We don't have enough spare capacity. The drivers are only trained on these Class 185s. It seems to me they're not fit for the route down to London. And First Group, the parent company, don't seem to be doing anything about the fact that Hull Trains' reputation, which was very good in the city, is taking a nosedive. People do not feel they're a reliable service anymore, and there's nothing from the Department of Transport on this. And again, just looking at the franchise that the Department of Transport and the Secretary of State are involved with, TransPennine run the station in Hull. They spent £1.4 million on our station, but we're still in the top 10 worst stations in the country. They've managed to build some small, smelly toilets to replace the previous ones, and some new some retail units which have remained empty for weeks and weeks. And yet, if every morning I walk through Canary Wharf to get to Westminster, and I see the Canary Wharf station, which costs £500 million and has a roof garden. And of course we know that's private money that's been put in, but we can't even get a toilet attendant in the station in Hull. So I just want to put that to the Secretary of State and to the Ministers, that the stark difference between the North and South, this is a carry-on, it's like a farce. And the Minister, the Secretary of State, has to take responsibility. The buck stops with him and he should go.
Bima Falami.